Hey everybody, how's it going out there? How you doing? How you doing? This is Solar Gray, the cinematic sorcerer, saying, hey, what is up? What is going on? I hope you guys like the new set. I really do, because we've been working really hard on all this. So, welcome my friends to the dark side of the room. Now, for those of you guys that are new, I want to seriously thank all the people out there that are new subscribers and all that jazz that's coming down. Now, why am I in the middle of a void? Because I'm trying to come up with a decent background. I'm not quite sure, but the Wizard's Tower has been really wonky and I've been away from it for a while. So this is like the first show in the past, 18 weeks or so. Anyway, either way, I'm back. And we are going to be talking about quite a few things. Now, right now, I want to give special thanks to my major patrons, being Shannon Boom Boom Lay and Paul Mansfield, of course. And honestly, I'm here and I'm just checking the chat real quick to make sure, because, you know, it's mainly just me. And, yep. So, for those of you guys that, that's interesting. Oh, there we go. Yeah, so for those of you guys that don't know what this show is about, this is my one-on-one conversation with you guys, or one on however many of you guys are watching, and I appreciate that you guys are here. I sincerely do. Still working out quite a few kinks for a lot of different things, and yeah, these are the things that I'm kind of, what is the term? Well, yeah, mainly just working out a couple of things, but I know a lot of you guys have this thing of, what is the term I'm looking for? A lot of the folks that I know have this thing where new stuff, not really their bag. You know, it's really, new stuff isn't really their bag. It's not really a thing that they are into and all that stuff, and I get that. But I've been into a lot of things that might be new for you guys, new for a lot of people that you might know. But I figure instead of going, hey guys, check this thing out or watch this YouTube video and all that stuff, I figured I would let you guys know from my point of view, like, why am I such a geek? Why am I such a nerd? You know, why do I like the stuff I like? And why should you? And that's really the thing. Now, as you guys know, I happen to be of, I am American, and I'm an American of the descent of the transatlantic, non-optional unpaid internship program. And with that, coming from where I come from, and over in the playlist for this show, you guys can see a lot of my history. And not done talking about my past, how I became a gamer and a comic nerd and a wannabe writer and all those other things. But there's this expectation that a lot of the nerd culture that's out there is surprising that people like me are into, or should I say people like me are into. I am really big into RPGs and comics and fan fiction. I was into anime for a long time, but it's kind of past me. But that doesn't mean that there's a lot of people in my neighborhood, or there isn't a lot of people in the neighborhood that I grew up in that's still into that stuff. But now that I've got the intro and all that stuff out the way, let's get along to paying some bills real quick. Just letting you guys know that Hey, look at all that stuff. Now, if you want to join me, hey, what's going on? I definitely want to give a major shout out to all the people that are there, the patrons, and a lot of the people that have really stood by us for a good amount of time within the building of this company. And of course, if you want to sit down and say what's going on to us, that's cool. All you got to do is head on over to NP City. What's going on? We've got Nicholas Hurst in there coming in, probably from Buffalo, New York, or somewhere overseas. We don't know. You know, he's always in a different spot. But if that's not really your bag, then just pull up your screen or pull up your email and reach out at backinthedeck@gmail.com. It's BACKINTHEDECK@gmail.com. Or, you know, you're on YouTube, so please subscribe and hit the bell. Hitting the bell is really more important because YouTube doesn't care if you subscribe. It's all weird and it changes every day. And of course, hit us up on the social media, the Twitter, the Instagram, that wretched hive of scum and villainy known as the Facebook, and join Deckers on the Book, which is our Facebook group where you guys can talk about the games that you're playing, check out the models that you're painting, off building, and all that jazz. So, thank you guys for showing up, and of course, if you really have a thing for what we do, if you like what we're doing, and you want to help support us in a more direct manner, I ain't mad at you for that. But what I am going to do is I'm going to give you a way to do that, and that is to head on over to patreon.com/BID_P and become a patron for as little as $1 a month. Just $1. Now, we've got tiers that go all the way up to $100, but just for $1, you get polling, special requests, and we send out a lot of different stuff. Right now, we're even running a contest where if we hit one of our goals, we'll be sending out dice towers and various other really cool stuff that's coming down. So please, head on in and take care of that stuff. So, today I said that we are going to be talking about the benefits one can reap from tabletop role-playing games. And I am a big fan of that particular thing. I'm going to send out one little tweet real quick. I know I should be a little more prepared, but it's a thing, and I'm still learning my way around. I hate notifications, but yeah, one of the things that I'm really big on as far as RPGs and stuff like that. Wait, looking at the thread, I'm trying to join. I joined a group on Facebook, or not on Facebook, but on Twitter. And yeah, so what I'm trying to do right now is I'm still trying to learn. Oh, there we go. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to learn my way around the Twitterscape. It's a tough one, so yeah, I'm looking at there's one. All right, yeah, so we're just gonna cool POC and D&D. That's what I was looking for. All right, cool. So POC and D&D, and just gonna let them know we are live right now. Check it out. And then, oh, see, again, Twitter confuses and confounds me. Paste. Okay, we are live. Yeah, there we go. All right. So, I'm saying chuck us out. This is fun. Sorry about the donkey thing right now. Yeah, there we go. So I guess I just figured out how to do it properly, and that helps. So yeah, as I was saying, I want to talk about the benefits that people in general, but definitely the people from the neck of the woods that I'm from, can really benefit in playing tabletop role-playing games. Now, I'm currently putting together a video. It's taking forever because my editing skills suck. On um, what role-playing games are, how to play them, because for those of you guys that are new to the channel, I am a middle-aged man, and I come from the very, very rural part of America known as South Central Los Angeles. If you want to know a little bit about my childhood, just rent movies like Boys in the Hood, um, South Central, Baby Boy, or pretty much anything that was from the 90s about gang violence and being a young black man. And in my neighborhood, I was an anomaly because every neighborhood has a thing against nerds, okay? Just the hatred of nerds is all the way across the board in American culture. If you study a lot, people are going to give you crap. But in my neck of the woods, it was a little different. But I'm not going to talk about that. That's another show. One of the things, though, is being a nerd, a Poindexter, a brainiac, all those other things I was called. I was into things that weren't very popular in my neck of the woods. Now, in my neck of the woods, the major things that really had cultural and cultural relevance were very physical activities. So a lot of sports, track, running, basketball, football, a lot of things that really didn't cost a whole lot. Number one, because all you needed was a ball. And dancing. Don't forget dancing because radios are everywhere. Music, they make music relatively free, so everybody was dancing. Shout out to everybody in urban areas, be it the Bronx or Detroit or certain parts of Atlanta or any of that. Y'all know what I'm talking about. We dance because it's what we can afford to do. And mom told us to go outside. Don't come home until the streetlights come on. But I was a reader. I was a builder, and I did a lot of mathematics. So that kind of put me in a different spot, partly because the kids in the neighborhood didn't understand what I was doing, and partly because when you come from the inner city, regardless of your ancestral heritage, but something about growing up fiscally disenfranchised gives you this idea, this not I don't want to say mindset because right wing people use that term way too much, but it gives you this culture that states that whatever it is that you want to do or that you're trying to do will be out of your reach. So if you want to be, say, a reader, if you want to read, that's not going to be your thing. You shouldn't be reading because what's the point of reading? Because you're never going to get out of this. Your schools aren't good enough to teach you how to be something other than a laborer. And let's say you manage to be really smart, you probably won't be able to pay for college anyway. This was the mindset when I was growing up, and in a lot of places it still is. Now, when I discovered tabletop role-playing games, I did it because I was bused to school, and with that, um, I got to see other cultures that were in the Los Angeles area, and again, that's where I discovered D&D. We talked about this on a previous show. Just go check the playlist. Anyway, um, one of the really big things that put a damper in that is something that not a lot of people understand, which is sort of a cultural propaganda campaign. Um, a whole lot of things happened to the descendants of the transatlantic slave trade that not a lot of people think about. And what's kind of there was a propaganda campaign that was set out right after the 13th Amendment was passed. Okay, things about how we were less than, we were monsters, we were trying to take your women, take your jobs, we were predatory, all that other stuff. And one of the things that stuck from our slave days was the fact that the church is the middle of the community, primarily because during the slave days, like not even slave masters would say you can't congregate to worship my God, especially since my church is the thing that makes you believe that you deserve what's happening to you. Okay, this is a big thing. For the record, I'm not Christian. I'm not a big fan of that kind of Christianity, primarily because of how it was used during the slave trade. This is full disclosure. So, getting out there and worshiping a God that was forced on my people, not really something that sits well with me. And not just worshiping a God that was forced on our people, but fearing the other things that were forced. And that is what I'm going to get into today. One thing about evangelical stuff, at least in the black community and a lot of the southern community, is there is a massive fear of the devil. Everything is Satan. If it's not glorifying God or demeaning yourself for the power structure, it must be Satan. Now, what does this mean? This means if it's fun but not approved by the church, it's Satan. If it makes you smile, but you didn't learn it at church with church people, then it's Satan. There's no in between. It's very binary. And this came to a head with RPGs in the late 70s, early 80s with something that gamers call satanic panic. And a lot of it still sticks. Okay? A lot of it still sticks. Now, don't get me wrong. A lot of the imagery of Dungeons and Dragons, a lot of the imagery is very visceral. I mean, we've got things like, bunches of dragons. We got lizard people and people with dark skin and big monsters and all that stuff. And I get where that would throw some non-Christian imagery, but before not being Christian anymore, I spent a long time as a Southern Baptist, which means I've read the Bible cover to cover 2 or 3 times with elders. And I will tell you, man, the Old Testament has some freaky stuff, and Revelations have monsters that I really want to stat out. I mean, we're talking like multi-headed lion creatures with scorpion tails that breathe fire on the side of good. I mean, like, if you look at what angels look like, oh my God. Angels as described in the Bible are horrifying. And those are on the good guy's side. So, this is like a really big thing where the imagery in Dungeons and Dragons did a lot of damage to its reputation in my community. I mean, don't get me wrong. A beholder is scary. I mean, look at this guy. And look at this guy. This guy right here is just a floating eye with a bunch of eye stalks and all that stuff. That does seem dark and satanic. And gamers for decades have been like, yeah, there is that dark imagery, but mom, dad, pastor, we're the good guys that are trying to destroy those things. Like, those things are imprisoning people and taking people hostage and all that stuff. And when I play the game, I'm the guy that's taking those guys down, That is a really, really big thing. And, if you look back at the Old Testament, you've got David fighting a Grigori, he was descendant of the Grigori, Nephilim, descendant of the Nephilim, and Goliath. Goliath being, having angelic blood, but being mean and all that stuff. And you got a little dude just taking him down with a rock and some faith. That is a thing that's possible in the pages of a role-playing game. So it's a thing. But how can role-playing games benefit people? Well, that is a really big thing I want to get into today, because this is something that I take into community centers in places like Compton and Linwood and the poor parts of other cities. Number one, let's get into how. How do you play one of these role-playing games? Well, that's very simple. The group of friends, like 2 to 5 to 6 or 7 people, sit down and they decide they want to play a game. I've got the one that I'll be talking about later on, Esper Genesis, and somebody reads the book, and then everybody else reads part of the book. And then, regardless of the system, they sit down with the rules of the universe that they're in, and someone writes an outline to a story. And then the other players create characters within the rules of the game to play out a story. Now, this is, as I've said hundreds of times, an elaborate game of pretend. But this is where the benefit comes in. Okay? I first learned how to write an outline in the 6th grade. And it was very, very clinical, very sterile. It was, this is the formula, blah, 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 blah. It even came with a little chart, which I like today. But it really wasn't holding. It really wasn't something that could hold my attention, if you will. You know, it was just like, okay, well, I'm writing a thing, and yeah, that is, you know, that is a thing that we're gonna do and look at. So you get this outline, and you're like trying to set out characters and all that other stuff, you know. But really, the outline itself, I mean, look at this. You've got a thing, and then another thing, which leads to a thing, which leads to a thing, which leads to a gate. You know, this is more of a flowchart type. And one of these things is really important because looking at this, yeah, you learn this stuff in school, but though we apply it every day, we apply these scenarios, we apply the model of creative writing to a great many things. What we don't think about is that though we are applying these great many things, we're doing it subconsciously. There is a level of knowledge called unconscious competence, and this is when you don't know that you know, you're just doing it right. Okay, but once you hit this place, and this is where you get with what's called rote learning. Okay, that's doing it over and over and over and over and over and over again, which is how public schools in underfunded areas tend to teach. But what it doesn't teach is why. It doesn't teach the reason behind the repeated stuff. It doesn't teach the principles of what you're learning. It's just, this is fact, obey, repeat. And it doesn't teach cognitive reasoning. So, though a flowchart type mindset is cognitive reasoning, it's not intentional, it's accidental. Okay? So, as a GM, a game master, dungeon keeper, storyteller, whatever you want to call it, depending on the game system, but the one that writes the outline has to really cognitive think about the story that they're writing, where the characters can take it, and what they can do in relation to where the characters take it. That's a lot of thinking. That's a whole lot of thinking. And it strengthens that brain meat muscle to go through different scenarios. Now, from a player's point of view, it's easy for a player to say, I kill the guy, and I kill the goblin and save the day. But the goblin fights back, and there are environmental factors that the player doesn't. It's a lot of people communicate in big concepts. I was talking to someone about the differences between white privilege and not having white privilege, and he was saying, well, he lost everything, and then he went in, retrained, and reinvented himself. And I'm like, well, stop. Reinventing yourself. What components does that what components does reinventing yourself consist of? How does one reinvent themselves? And he couldn't tell me because he can only think in these broad terms. This is that unconscious competence taking hold. He doesn't know how he succeeded. He just knows that he did. And what I was pointing out was the fact that he was allowed without systemic interference on reinventing himself, and I was able to talk to him item by item, thing by thing, in a manner that looked a lot like this, to let him know the things that he could do that I could not, just based on systemic stuff. And he was actually able to see my point a little more. And this is one of the benefits that I've gained, yes, from studying science, but more to the point, from playing tabletop RPGs. Because you can easily say, I rescue the princess and save the day. But what does that consist of? What are the things that you have to do? In one of the games I used to play, Pathfinder, it is very, very, very granular. There are tiny, tiny, tiny bits all over the place, where if you want to do something in that game, you gotta be specific as all get out if you want to play that game. If you want to say, I don't know, if you want to climb something, you have to have the climb skill. If you don't have the climb skill, then you get a penalty for it. I mean, think about that. That's a huge thing. And it's like, well, I just wanna do the thing. And it's like, okay, do you know how to do the thing? How well do you know how to do the thing? Where would you have learned this? How did that skill get on your character sheet? And this actually gets people thinking in less of a one-dimensional state. Just as players, how do you do this? How did you get there? Now, as a GM, thinking of the scenarios in ways that are more possible or probable or likely, like as a dungeon master, I have to practice with every table I sit at, creative writing, theatrical improv, and of course, acceptance. Because no plan ever survives first contact with execution. Ever. you know. So with everything that I want to happen in the story, I have to have a plausible thing for every decision that I can think of for every player that's in the game. Just think about that. If I have a 4-person game and 4 people all have 5 different options that they could do, including not do anything, I have to come up with a story that happens because of the actions that they took, based on the story that I've already come up with. I mean, that's consequential thinking. It's consequential thinking, and it's planning ahead with a lot of these things. Now, how do I apply that in the real world? Well, when I go to my day job, X, Y, and Z can happen. What are my contingency plans? I could be dealing with my boss that has to deal with their boss. So if they're in this mood and I have to accomplish a task, but I need tools, how am I going to talk to this person? How am I going to use my charisma to be plausible in what can be done, what can't be done, or what I want to be done? Those communication skills are big. What do I think? What do I think will happen with a coworker, and how can I adjust my behavior to not have the fallout there? You see what I mean? And the more that I've played role-playing games over the years, the easier that this has become, because tabletop role-playing games are interesting in the sense of they are a reflection of the culture of the players, but they are also mild simulations. But as I was saying, I've got 5 players. I have to come up with stuff, or 4 players, they all have 5 options. So I have to come up with 20 plans to move them down the path of storytelling to hopefully end up at the destination of a fun night being had. Preferably without alcohol. Okay? That's a challenge. It's a really fun intellectual challenge for me. And this applies in regular living, as I said with that example at work, or when I go to a family function. I can think of a character sheet for my cousins. You see what I mean? These are some of the benefits. The other benefits that I've been noticing, because I've been working with a lot of new players, is that my levels of practical mathematics went way up when I was in school. Okay, now make no mistake, I was that jerky kid that could look at a quadrilateral equation and just have the answer. I just knew what it was. I did all the math in my head really quick. But I'm in my 40s. Guess how often I get to practice that stuff? Answer: whenever I do my taxes. So that's about it. But outside of that, I ride a motorcycle, so I have to calculate my gas mileage because most motorcycles don't have a gas gauge. So how many miles have you've driven will determine whether or not you need to stop for gas. And that's important on long trips. So yes, yes, Vixen, fun without inebriates, okay? Um, because, in my experience, the alcohol brings the stupid, and that's not fun for the majority of the people at the table unless they are all inebriated as well. And me being a guy that ain't big on alcohol, yeah. Anyway, because I really like I like engaging with the world around me, and most of the people I know, they do inebriates to separate from the world around them. It doesn't help them engage better, it helps them engage in a more numb manner, if you will. So it's just a different things. um hey ganja. Anyway, um so as I was saying, these things are all part of the tabletop role playing game process. Have you ever sat down and thought about a story and then sat down to write it and realized that the scenario in your head is not similar to the one that's on the page? Well, when you role play a game, you're actually in the process of cognitively brainstorming. But again, this falls back to that unconscious competence. Now, where I come from, God, I seem like I'm all over the place, but I tend to go on this thing, but anytime I go on a tangent, I come back, all right? So, we were talking about the cognitive thinking, and what's the term I'm looking for? Um, the unconscious competence that comes from rote learning, all right? Now, a lot of people, if they grew up in the public school system between the 1980s and the 2000s, have this deep rooted belief that they learn a certain way, that there's only one way that information sticks with them, and that is it. Now, some people are better at learning by doing, some people are better at learning by reading. I'm a really big fan of learning by watching. Okay, I'm a big fan. Um, but there are at least four different ways that a person can learn. Just because one way is better than another, it doesn't mean that the other ways are impossible. But when you come from a paradigm of education that pushes do it or you get in trouble, do it or you get in trouble, do it or you're going to fail. If you're going to fail, you're going to get your butt beat when you get home. Or, there's all this pressure that comes around mental, physical, and emotional abuse, um, tied up in reading, writing, and arithmetic. Think about that. Just think about that. Reading for pleasure is not a thing because you might get beat up for it. And when you read whatever it is the teacher tells you, you have to read it, but you can't really enjoy it in a way that you know how to enjoy things, because there's going to be a test, there's going to be a quiz. If you get it wrong, somebody's going to beat you up. And in my case, if you get it, beat you up, i.e., older siblings that take on parental figures, or whoever's around. And in my case, if you get it right, you're going to get beat up by your peers. So this does not make reading fun. This doesn't make math fun. None of these things make all that stuff fun. So how do you increase those skills? Well, the answer is you have to do something that's socially acceptable that happens to do that. Now, this is where comics came in for me, because I could read comic books and the kids at school wouldn't beat me up unless they wanted to beat me up and take my comics. And then when they realized, as soon as I was done reading a comic, I had no problem giving it away, they stopped beating me up. So, But the thing was, I was reading comic books. Comic books were cool. So, yeah, that was cool. But, let's just say um, having somebody ask to borrow your Spider-Man comic is a lot cooler than getting hit with your copy of Stephen King's The Stand. You get what I mean? Um, so playing tabletop role-playing games allows people, especially young adults, or as I call them, post-adolescents, that grew up in environments like I grew up in, to learn to enjoy reading again, to learn to enjoy writing. They can write the stories. Now, where I come from in the ghetto, the only stuff that you were allowed to write was more rap. That was it. Like, you couldn't write poetry, because I was big on poetry. I like iambic pentameter, but I wasn't a rapper, so it wasn't okay. But as far as writing short stories, oh no, 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 that wasn't allowed. What you think? You gonna be a writer? What you think somebody's gonna read your stuff? You see what I mean? So all of that, what's the term? Um, Discouragement coming from, and I was quoting family members. Okay, love my cousin Shawnee, but yeah, seriously, those were family members saying, what you think you are better than me? You think you're going to write stories? Where are you going to use math? What you going to do with that math? You know, um, and that paradigm is so hard, right? That when you hit the post-adolescent years in places where understanding reading is important because one, your professors or instructors, notice I'm using junior college and college language, or your boss has this preconceived notion that you've already learned this, because where they come from, they learned it by the fourth grade. So why don't you know it at 19? So when you fall behind on that scale, what do? You know, you could try and take a class, or you and your friends could start playing a role playing game where you have a safe environment to write these stories and work out kinks and plot holes and storylines. Really think about characters, not just, I'm playing this character now. Okay, so you're level 1 bard. What made you want to study music? You know, where did oh, you're level 1 pilot? Cool. Where'd you go to flight school? And it's like, well, I went to flight school in Hawthorne. There's no Hawthorne in this world. You have to look up you have to really learn the setting. And if you stick throughout that work, every time you stick throughout the work, there's more fun to be had. So you're working for fun, and the only punishments that you're going to get is a little bit of not understanding. Now, this could chip away at the ego, make no mistake. But most gamers come in two flavors, and that is, oh, well, check it out on page 135, and don't ask me after 3 months. And, what are you, stupid? And that second category ain't welcome here. You know that, we know that. Those are gatekeepers. We don't deal. Now, a funny thing, though. When I try and teach these games, I remember when I first got my own copy of a role-playing game. And my mom took a look at it, and she didn't understand how it was a game because it's a book. Okay? You think games and you think like Monopoly, sorry, they come in boxes, or video games. They come in a box, you open the box, you take the thing out of the box, and then the thing inside the box interacts with either a console, a computer, or other people with little widgets, like they have little widgets here, and meeples and all that other stuff. But this book, you have a book, and the book is the game. That's it. This is the game, But then when you look at the book and you start reading, okay, you start reading the book, you start looking at how to play the game. You're looking at a reference book. You're looking at a textbook. Okay, a textbook with very little narrative, a lot of directions, a lot of equations, and a lot of charts. And it's like, hold up. This is a textbook. This is like my algebra book. What why am I spending $50 on a textbook? to learn a thing. But once you have the thing in there, it's crazy because you're looking at a textbook. I want to see what the chat is talking about real quick. Hey, Vixen. Oh, God. No, I'm not poisoning the water supply. And no, I do not lie, Ganja. I do not lie. People do this stuff without intoxicants. I know it's crazy. But the deeper you get into role-playing games, the scarier your research skills become because you know your way around a textbook. You know your way around an encyclopedia, so you know how to look something up. When I was growing up, there was not a whole heck of a lot of people to teach me how to study. That was one of my biggest problems. I was always told to study more, but I didn't know the mechanics that went into studying. You know what I mean? It's like I was told to take notes, but take notes on what? What part of what the teacher is saying is important? What is the thing I should be writing down? And a lot of people just default try and write down everything the teacher says. But I couldn't write that fast and legibly. So what was I going to do? But as I got more into D&D, which was the role-playing game that really opened the door. And then Vampire the Masquerade was where I really learned how to roleplay. I didn't get asking a question to the book by going to the index and looking up the department and reading the 3 pages. And the reading part, at first it is difficult. I know where I grew up, and a lot of you guys probably had this thing too. The teachers did this well-meaning and terribly damaging thing of having all the students read whatever it is they were reading, but they would have them read 2 paragraphs out loud for the class, and the next person would have to read 2 paragraphs out loud. And again, I get that they were trying to have kids really work on their speed of reading and their oration, but all that really happened was 30, 40 embarrassed kids ended up accidentally not reading the right thing because they were nervous, and now they think that they look stupid, and now they're frustrated. They don't want to do it anymore. They quit, and nobody can get them to do it again because they come from environments where the number one convincer was physical violence. But teachers can't hit the kids, so a lot of teachers got around it by calling in the conferences, and then the parents would beat the kids once they got home. But either way, this was very not helpful when it came to reading out loud. And again, when I was a kid, I wanted to be a lot of things, but the one that stuck longest was an actor. And I was told by my junior high school counselor that if I wanted to be an actor, I had to read prolifically. And I'm like, I hate reading. And he was like, why? I'm like, because I get beat up if I read. I get beat up if I don't read. I get made fun of all the time. Like, this whole reading thing, not really my bag. And that was very environmental. It was my bag, but if I let on that it was my bag, I could end up in the hospital. And that's no exaggeration. So how do you get a kid into reading? Well, you, again, like with the comic books, which is where I learned the proper use of the word myriad, not the movie Heathers. I could practice my reading. I could practice my impressions. I could be Spider-Man when I'm reading a Spider-Man comic, and I can be like, all right, good old Chrome Dome, we're going to be blah, blah, blah. Mysterio, I always punch you out. So let's just get to this part, right? I could do that. I could practice, I'm in different voices, and I'm in different, blah, 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 But, it was something that I can do that was acceptable. Now, where does the writing come in? I loved to tell stories. The first contest I ever won, and I say the first because there have been 3, 42-year-old man saying 3, but the first contest I ever won was in the 6th grade, and it was a storytelling contest where I got up on stage and I told African folk tales based around Anansi, the spider god, who was the purveyor of stories. And, it's the only trophy I ever really won. Everything else was participation. And if you don't like participation trophies, I'll hit you with mine. But, you know, it was really one of those things where I loved telling stories. But when I wrote them down, they were never as long as I thought they were going to be in my head. You know, I mean, to this day, I still suffer from that where I can recite an entire episode of something. And then when I sit down, I'm so busy trying to pick the proper words or, you know, stuff like that. Pick the proper words, try to find the right cadence and all that stuff. And then transferring that from here, past here, to this has always been a problem. But when I run games, I can write down the scenarios that could happen. I can have a plan for all of those things that come down. And I could keep proper notes. I could write down, I was a lot better at picking out what was important, what was worth remembering, what was that key phrase that would help me remember the rest of the paragraph, or what was the key point of what that meant. You know, why did he tell us that? What was so important? What is he trying to say? Or as I say, when it comes to gaming in general, what is the game behind the game? You know, what is actually being said? Just to qualify that phrase, blackjack isn't about getting 21, it's about beating the dealer. Now, you can make the dealer lose or you can win, but if you're aiming for 21, you're going to lose a lot of money. If you're aiming for 17 through 21, and your goal is to either get a higher number than the dealer or to make the dealer bust, that opens up the game to a lot more options. You see what I mean? But the game behind the game is making the dealer lose, either to you or to the rest of the table. You see what I mean? And that changes up the whole concept. But when you're in school in the inner city or in rural areas that don't have a whole lot of funding, you're taught, metaphorically, that blackjack is 21. You're trying to get to 21. If you've got 2 10s, hit and hope for an ace because you're supposed to get to 21. And if you don't get to 21, then though you beat the dealer and though you won money, you still lost, so you still suck. You see, you see where the disconnect is? You know, and that is the difference between conceptual learning and learning by rote. And you cannot learn a tabletop RPG by rote. You just cannot do it because you're dealing with the imaginations of too many people. So the main benefit of the tabletop RPG is you have to open your mind to ideas that aren't what you already know. Okay? You might be right. You might be correct, but someone else might be because it's not a zero sum. It's not one of those things where if you're right, someone else has to be wrong. Much like in Algebra 2, there can be 4 or 5 different answers to the same equation. The question isn't who wins by being right. The real question is, what do you learn along the way? So, with that, we're going to take a few more minutes because I said that we're going to tackle a question. And this isn't a question that was sent in because people don't send me email questions or ask me questions on Twitter, which you should. This is a question that I have because I have a lot of friends, and this is something that I'm coming out with a lot of my friends of color. And partly, like, my theory is there is a bit of something going on with the meta-narrative of entertainment right now. And that is our obsession with being the bad guy. Okay? And I'm not just saying that because the Joker movie is coming or because Pennywise the clown is the main focus that people are looking at for it too. But I have a lot of friends who say, you know what? No, I am the bad guy. And then I think back to Breaking Bad and I think back to The Sopranos. And as a person of color, there is one thing that sticks out in my head, and that is the hands up thing. Just, no, not hands up, don't shoot. I mean, hands up, just fine, whatever. You know, the total reticence and not submission to, but just whatever, I don't care type thing that comes when, okay, being a 6'4", almost 200-pound black dude, a lot of people are afraid of me. It doesn't matter what I'm doing. It doesn't matter what I'm wearing. A lot of people look at me and they're like, oh, he's scary. So my entire adult life, I've been fighting against the preconceived notion that I'm the bad guy. And then I see, like, I have a few friends, and I'm not gonna lie, a lot of them are black dudes that are bigger than me that are just like, you know what? I am the bad guy. I am the bad guy. You should be afraid of me. Now, I'm actually wondering if this is, well, not wondering, but I think that this is happening because it's like, you know what? Fine. Yeah, sure. I'm the bad guy. Can we continue having lunch now? Like, can I get on with my life? You have already labeled your fear of me as my villainy and not yo thing. So you know what? Fine. I'm the bad guy. Can we move on with this conversation? Or is it that within narrative, I can say this as an actor, the villains do tend to be meatier roles. They are meatier roles. They are more fun to play. So I have noticed that in narrative, the bad guy seems to be the thing that actors want to go to. And there's a lot of talk in the internet that says, like, a hero is only as good as his worst villain, you know. But I'm not a big fan of being the villain. You know what I mean? Personally, I always liked the mentor figure. I like the Obi-Wans. But yeah, one of the big things that I'm wondering, and maybe you guys can talk about this, especially down in the comments because we're running out of time, is what are the pros and cons to being the bad guy? And if you are a person of color who takes that mantle that says, you know what, I am the bad guy, I'm the villain, I'm looking at you, Williams. Actually, okay, now I'm looking at you. But if you take solace in just being the bad guy, I would like to know if it's an environmental, a defensive reaction to environmental circumstances, or do you just think that curbing babies is fun? I don't know. I really don't know. Since I've done my best to not be the villain over the past few years, over the past 30 years, but nor have I wanted to be a hero because I don't think in binaries. But with that, we've been going for about an hour, and you guys know I try and keep this show tight. But just in case, this is a just in case type thing. You guys have all that stuff. Please leave a comment, and just leave a comment in the comment section. That would be cool and super awesome of you guys to do. And of course, I'm actually wondering if this is a thing. Yeah, that's a thing. And much like the Emmys, I'm being played off. All right, I get it, Tower. Okay. But yeah, so if you guys, have any stuff for that, feel free to have the conversation. Leave comments, subscribe, hit the bell, do all that other stuff, and feel free to send me an email over at backinthedeck@gmail.com. That's BACKINTHEDECK@gmail.com. Thank you for joining me here live on YouTube. I'm here every single Tuesday that I'm not booked with a really high-paying job. Around 2 in the afternoon, around 2ish. We got started around 2:15 today. And yeah, subscribe and please hit the bell because YouTube doesn't care if you just push subscribe. I don't know what their algorithm does. No one does. It's a Lovecraftian horror. Check us out over on SoundCloud. There you can get the archives of all of our stuff, audio, for absolutely free. And we appreciate all of that jazz. You can also hit us up on all the social medias and all that jazz. Just look for Back in the Deck. And of course, if you guys have that time, then head on over to patreon.com/BID_P and become a patron. Support us for as little as $1 a month if that's all you can afford. I can bat my eyelashes at you cutely to ask for the $10 a month thing. That's where I think the best value is. But if you got $100 a month, I ain't gonna be mad. So I'm kind of happy that you guys are here talking to us about all that stuff. And special shout out to That Nerd Soul. We actually have At present, we have a video up right now on the YouTubes about, well, we did this thing where we ended up going to Star Trek, the original motion picture. So yeah, you can just check it out here. There we go. Yeah, you can check it out here where we talk about Star Trek the motion picture, and it was you know, his sci-fi podcast, which is awesome. So check out all that stuff. One of my favorite friends, and of course, hit us up on all those Instagrams and all that stuff. And just remember, if anybody tells you that you can't like what you like, or yeah, you can't like what you like because of the circumstances of your birth, be it race, religion, creed, gender identity, sexual orientation, your disability, or your budget, you just tell them to take them cards and put them back in the deck. This is Solar Gray, the Cinematic Source. We're saying thank you guys for joining me on the dark side of the room.